So for the Industrial Safety Ordinance, I believe we need an Industrial Safety Ordinance for trust, safety, and transparency. We need a seat at the table. This will be explained. I believe the public has a right to know what is going on, what to do in an emergency, and what is in the air. I know we are challenging the status quo. Our job as a city and as elected officials is to ensure public health, safety, and welfare. We can't do this in the dark and not be engaged or have the resources to be engaged. A seat at the table means we can review reports, comments on rules, such as the recent Air District approval of fence line monitoring on the east side of the refinery. A right to know means what, where, and how. From what is in our air, where do we go in an emergency, and how do we prevent another near catastrophic event at the refinery? How I began, as early as 2004, I and other council members sought an industrial safety ordinance modeled after Contra Costa County. We negotiated an agreement at that time that I believe resulted in Valero becoming one of the safest refineries in California through the VPP process. But May 5th happened. I worked with a college student intern. We compared the Contra Costa Ordinance and the soon-to-be adopted and now adopted regulations by Cal OSHA and Cal EPA regulations. We actually wore him out, Randy Sawyer, the Contra Costa County Hazardous Materials Director. He shared his 25 years of experience and growing with their ordinance. One example that he shared is large industry refineries are required to have independent units of operation with separate power, exactly what we need in Benicia. Others testifying tonight will expand on this. I was introduced to Terry Malacca, a local attorney who volunteered to work with us, the Industrial Safety Ordinance Working Group, that had approached me after several months had gone by without a word from the city and my request. We will hear from Terry later. He has done a brilliant job of creating our draft Benicia Industrial Safety Ordinance. I believe we need to change the status quo, grow trust in our community, have a seat at the table, and transparency and preparedness. We can do this with an industrial safety ordinance which provides, through fees, a budget-neutral proposal. My ask tonight is that the council direct staff, and I have put this in writing, which you do not have before you in the staff report, direct staff to review the draft ordinance and report back to council within 90 days. The standard for review will be by a public interest, subject matter specialist, legal review based on the public's interests. The review will be specific and recommend changes to the draft for clarity and legal sufficiency. Staff will provide this assessment to the council and make recommendations for council's consideration. So,
Mayor and Council, the item before you is the second step, as you mentioned, of your two-step request process brought forward to discuss adopting an industrial safety ordinance in the city of Benicia. You may remember, as you discussed on May 23rd, 2017 City Council meeting, Mayor Patterson brought this request to Council. That evening, Council directed staff to agendize the item for discussion at a future meeting. Staff has conducted the preliminary research on this subject, and it is included in your staff report. To provide a short background on this item, in 1998, the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors adopted an industrial safety ordinance which required regulated facilities in their jurisdiction to implement comprehensive safety programs. A few years later, the City of Richmond adopted their industrial safety ordinance, modeled after the Contra Costa ordinance. Both of these ordinances are managed by the Contra Costa County staff. It is important to acknowledge that a little over a year has passed since the May 23rd council meeting, and in that time, a number of significant changes have occurred at the state level. The state, having recognized the work done in Contra Costa County, used the Contra Costa's ISO as a model to rewrite their California Accidental Release Prevention Program, referred to as Program 4. Effective October 1st of 2017, the state of California adopted its refinery regulations to Program 4. That was to align with, and in some cases exceed, those in the Contra Costa County ISO. It is also important to note that the California Accidental Release Prevention Program in both Contra Costa and in Solano County is managed by the Certified Unified Program Agency, or CUPA, and in Solano County, that is filled by the Solano County Department of Resource Management. And we have invited staff from the Solano County Resource Management here tonight to assist with answering questions that you may have. Finally, I'd like to point out in the staff report, we provided 2 options for council consideration, but staff is looking for really any direction council may provide. As you know, you're not limited to those 2 options.
Jackie Ward live in Benicia with new details on the evacuations.
Huge flames and massive dark plumes of smoke poured from the stacks of the Valero refinery due to a power disruption, according to the Valero spokesperson. PG&E says the outage happened at 6:40 this morning during a routine switching of an electrical transmission system. It only lasted 18 minutes, but hours later, the flames and smoke continued to burn off into the sky.
K6 RQG City Alert just announced that they've opened a shelter for community center shelter for evacuees at 370 East Elm Street at the community center. KK6 RQG.
Refineries are safer in Contra Costa County as a result of this ordinance, and major chemical accident releases have gone down as a result. Refineries, labor unions, community, government, consultants will all agree on that. They may not agree on some other things, but they agree on that. And on our web,
when you have a power outage like what Valero had, okay, it was an immediate loss of power. Okay, you have units that are starting to overpressure. You have temperatures increasing, and the only safety device that refinery has is a flare system. Okay, that is exactly what they did. They went to the flare. Now, I don't really think people kind of argue that so much. What concerns me more in sitting here tonight is that, refineries need to be partners with their community. They need to be transparent with their community. They need to share, if they have incidents, they need to share those incidents, they need to share those causes, and they need to share those recommendations. Okay? That is what a good steward of a community does. There needs to be some communication with the community. And there has to be, they have to be transparent. If you are going to be a VPP facility, then you need to learn to be transparent with your community.
There's some alarming new numbers about the pollution from last month's power outage at the Valero refinery in Benicia. It led to 2 weeks of flaring and toxic gas filling the air. KPX5's Melissa Kane live in Benicia, where a year's worth of sulfur dioxide was released in this one incident. Melissa?
Yeah, Veronica, we're here in Benicia where just about 1 month ago on May 5th, the refinery started burning off gas. And it was burning gas without the usual filters to protect the air. Now, areas nearby were evacuated, and anecdotally, we heard that dozens of people went to the hospital. But still, the public was not given specifics about exactly what was in the air until now. That morning, PG&E had been working on some equipment, and that led to a power outage at the Valero refinery. With no power, the refinery had to get rid of combustible materials, which they did by burning them. KQED obtained a copy of a report filed by Valero with the Governor's Office of Emergency Services.
The Valero refinery is responsible for releasing 74,000 pounds of sulfur dioxide into the air through a 2-week period where it flared off this dangerous gas and put nearby communities at risk.
74,000 pounds compared to 15,000 pounds in all of 2015 and 14,000 pounds in all of 2016.
Sulfur dioxide is a fairly harmful chemical that can cause damage to your skin or irritate your eyes and lungs, can exacerbate or make worse people who are suffering from asthma.
And that's not all.
The refinery released an amount of carbonyl sulfide, which can cause damage to your brain and to your lungs over a long period of exposure.
And the public was not made aware.
This is the first accounting that we've had of just how big a volume we're talking about.
Now, we reached out to Valero multiple times for comment, and they have not responded to our requests. Although a company representative did go to a city council meeting and say they blame PG&E for this incident. Of course, that doesn't explain why Valero didn't have a backup generator or why they kept the public in the dark about what they were burning into the air for 2 weeks. So still, many questions. Live in Benicia, Melissa Kane, KPIX5.
But I'm speaking for myself tonight and for the Industrial Safety Ordinance Working Group. In May of 2017, we realized that we did not know what was in our air. Our notification system did not work. No one knew what to do, and no one knew who was in charge. We did not and still do not know what could prevent another disaster from happening. We were not in the loop. We were not considered. Valero said, "Trust us," and that was that. Well, some of us thought we deserved more. We had, after all, seen Valero unilaterally shut down air monitors that it had agreed to in a settlement agreement with the community, and has since refused to negotiate with the community to get those back up. So trust with Valero is a little thin. Did other communities have a way of making sure their health and safety were considered? It turns out they did. They had industrial safety ordinances. We are the only refinery town without one. Richmond has an ordinance. All the other refineries in Contra Costa are covered by the county ordinance. Many people with a common interest in keeping Benicia safe got together last fall and started the Industrial Safety Ordinance Working Group. We put on a forum and several speakers talked about what an industrial safety ordinance could do. If you didn't go to that or watch it on YouTube, we had one memorable quote from Contra Costa Supervisor John Joya, who serves on the California Air Resources Board and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Board. Everyone agrees that refineries in Contra Costa County are safer because of the local ordinance, and major chemical release accidents have gone down. The result of our ordinance has been safer facilities, a better working relationship with the community, and the ability to respond in a quick way to improve the ordinance if we learn something. We spent time thinking about what we wanted in a Benicia ordinance. An ordinance was drafted and reviewed and revised to meet the needs of Benicia. That is the draft that has been presented to the city. It moves on our timeline. It has taken the state 19 years after Contra Costa County passed an industrial safety ordinance to pass its own. This ordinance will pay for itself, something that may not be true at the state level. If it needs to be changed, we can do it locally much quicker than at the state level, where people from all over the state, some with interests that are not ours, will participate. This ordinance does not duplicate state efforts, but complements them. It will provide for things like community monitors that are not in the state ordinance. Other legislation may provide for monitors who will be more concerned with getting them up and running, someone here or someone in Sacramento. We cannot rely on the Air District to help us. Valero presented a plan for monitors to the Air District, which was approved last week. It has no monitors along the fence line in residential neighborhoods. It has no community monitors. You need them both. They work in conjunction with each other. The community monitors are what would pick up pollutants from flaring, not the fence line monitors. But Valero and the Air District don't seem to think that it's necessary that we have monitors for residential neighborhoods, despite the fact that during this incident, smoke was clearly drifting over residential neighborhoods during part of the flaring. The ordinance provides for more community engagement and planning for emergencies. It makes sure that we are in the loop. The people who live here deserve an industrial safety ordinance. We urge you to support implementing one to get local monitors, to get a better disaster response system, to respond to local concerns, and to move much more quickly than the state, county, or region can. We have already done the heavy lifting of developing an ordinance. We ask that you direct staff to review it and report back in a timely manner.
Hi, I'm Pato Smith, Benicia resident, a registered nurse and member of the ISO committee. Benicia needs an industrial safety ordinance because not much has changed since the May 5th flaring incident that spewed 74,000 pounds of toxic sulfur dioxide into the air over a 2-week period. Almost half was released on May 5th, which resulted in a shelter-in-place, evacuation orders for parts of the city, and over a dozen people receiving emergency medical treatment. The dangerous flaring occurred for another 3 intermittent days, releasing more sulfur dioxide throughout the city without any citywide public alerts. Sulfur dioxide inhaled in large doses in a short time can cause life-threatening pulmonary edema, death if the exposure is high enough, and also a lifelong asthma condition called reactive airway dysfunction syndrome. Benicia already has a poor history with asthma. In 2014, we had 25% more asthma-related emergencies than the state of California. Solano County children in the same study had an active asthma rate of 25% compared to the California state level of 10%. Also alarming is the lung and breast cancer rates for Benicia. The lung cancer level is 30% more than the California level, and the breast cancer level is double the California level. Some of the chemicals connected to the oil refining process are carcinogenic, can irritate asthma, and with 5 refineries surrounding the strait, these chemicals can make their way into Benicia. One of the worst cancer-causing chemicals is benzene, which is normally found in crude oil and can be airborne. Another chemical, nitrogen oxide, referred to as NOx, which is a particulate-forming pollutant, think of tiny soot, contributes to asthma-related emergencies. With the addition of air monitors within our community, we will finally know what chemicals are in our air and be able to adjust our lives accordingly. The other reason for a Benicia ordinance besides air monitoring is that the city will be able to follow up after any incidents like May 5th and potentially make our city safer. The report from Solano County regarding the May 5th incident, it stated that the cause was an 18-minute shutdown of the 2 power sources for the refinery, the PG&E operated main power line, and the second PG&E operated backup power line. Also, it said that Valero had another source of power, a 47 megawatt cogen plant, which was insufficient to run the refinery and had to be connected to one of the PG&E lines for it to remain online. PG&E is the primary and backup source for powering the refinery 24/7, and with their history of being sued by Valero for their poor track record of reliability and safety problems in California, this will likely happen again, especially since California State is proposing preemptively shutting down power lines to prevent more devastating fires like the Wine Country fires. So council members, please give your consent to the staff to start working towards a Benicia Industrial Safety Ordinance, because I don't want to find myself driving through another toxic black cloud of sulfur dioxide, or worse, maybe running from it. And I'd like to give you a copy of my data that I used, and I'll do it afterwards.
So Rick, I just want to let you know that I didn't turn the clock on properly, so you're gonna do 4 minutes, right?
So, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
what?
Go.
Yeah, okay. Okay. My name is Rick Beeson, and I've been a resident of Benicia for 36 years. I'm also I've been a union pipe fitter working in refineries since 1970. And I'm also a member of the Industrial Safety Ordinance Working Group that is presenting this. I would like to talk a little bit about communication. I'm concerned about the lack of communication between Valero and our city. It's been over a year since Valero's massive month-long flaring debacle of May 2017. During that incident, the community had to get our information from the media, as we saw in the video up there. The media reported that Valero released 5 years' worth of toxic chemicals into our air over a 2-week period. Even as I stand here tonight, Valero still hasn't provided any public reports with an objective root cause analysis or any corrective actions that they should be implementing. To help rectify this problem, I believe the city should implement an industrial safety ordinance like the Industrial Safety Ordinance currently in place in Contra Costa County. This would help to open up the lines of communication between Valero and the surrounding community. An industrial safety ordinance would include, number one, initial reports to Benicia within 72 hours of any major chemical accidents and releases that include root cause analysis regardless of the state regulations at the time of the incidents. These reports would be followed up with regular updates with corrective actions to be taken. Number two, a ordinance would implement a requirement for public outreach and information program that will serve as the vehicle for a public education. Number three, a requirement for a safety plan with stringent requirements, public participation review, and authorization for the city to require changes in the safety plan or safety program. Number four, it would expand the list of regulated substances beyond those covered by the federal and state risk management program and expand audits and inspections for all units of the stationary source. Number five, it would require an air monitoring system at Valero's fence line and locations within the surrounding community outside the fence line. The residents and businesses of Benicia have a right to know what steps Valero has taken to mitigate any further incidents like this. A good neighbor would provide answers to the community it's part of. We need to quit waiting for them to step up to the plate and become a good neighbor. Our city council should implement an industrial safety ordinance that would fill the communication gap as a step towards making our city a safer place to live. Since it is the primary responsibility of the city council to look after the health, safety, and welfare of the people of Benicia, I am asking the council to direct the city staff to review the industrial safety ordinance and report back to the council. In conclusion, can I ask the council and the mayor, can I ask the people that support the industrial safety ordinance that are in this room tonight to please stand? Is that okay?
Yes.
Well, that looks pretty apparent to most of the people here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, council members, staff, and fellow Benicians. My name is Terry Malika. I'm a resident of Benicia since 2012, husband and father of 2, living in the community, and an attorney since 1988. Could you go to the next slide, please? I'm here tonight to support the Industrial Safety Ordinance, which I drafted in conjunction with the Industrial Safety Ordinance Working Group, and to explain why I think the council should adopt it and support it. There are 4 essential purposes. There's 4 essential purposes or objectives of the Industrial Safety Ordinance. The first is process safety management. This is a system of internal analyses within the refinery to determine how the processes of handling hazardous waste are, whether they're effective or not, and whether best practices are being employed. The Industrial Safety Ordinance would give the city participation in the process safety management process and make it better able and better prepared to address emergencies when they occur. And as you heard from John Joya when he testified on the videotape, process safety management has made refineries much more safe. There's been a substantial decrease in the number and severity of major incidents as a result of communities that have adopted such ordinances. The second objective is community-based ambient air quality monitoring. Now, many of you may know that since the year 2000, the community has attempted to reach agreements with Valero to encourage air monitors to be put in place. There was a 2003, 2008, and 2011 settlements, and yet no air monitors exist today. The draft industrial safety ordinance will require a network of ambient air quality monitors that are supervised and implemented by the city and the fire department. The third and perhaps most important objective is to provide for public supervision and participation in the management of the risks, what we call a seat at the table. The city will have, through the ordinance, access to the PSM reports, information necessary to develop emergency and contingency plans, and be able to encourage the use of state-of-the-art equipment and technology. And fourthly, the objective of the ordinance is to be budget neutral. It does this through authorization to have a fee schedule adopted to cover the costs of implementation. Now, many of the complaints that I've heard about why we don't need an industrial safety ordinance, I would like to try to address. Some folks have said this is not necessary or it's preempted by existing or state law. So I spent a fair amount of time trying to look at that issue and develop an opinion on it, and the answer here is squarely no. California Health and Safety Code Section 25500, which calls for the development of business and area plans for the release or threatened release of hazardous materials, specifically provides that there is no preemption. And as you can see here on the screen, this is the specific legislation. The legislature says that it does not intend to preempt any local actions, ordinances, or regulations that impose additional or more stringent requirements on businesses that handle hazardous materials. So why did the legislature specifically allow localities to adopt additional or more stringent requirements? Because local communities are more directly and immediately impacted by the release of hazardous materials, and local communities must plan for contingencies and prepare for emergency responses. That is why we need an industrial safety ordinance to authorize the city to have that kind of control. One of the questions often raised is whether it'll lead to a big unnecessary bureaucratic overregulation of the refinery. I studied this issue and found the answer again is no. If you look at the state legislation, Health and Safety Code Section 25504B provides for a streamlined process managed by the Uniform Program Agency, in this case the Solano County Health Department, who is supposed to administer the state regulations and any local ordinances that impose those more strict and strenuous requirements for the city. Many people have brought up the issue of the new state regulations and whether those already accomplish the same objectives as the Industrial Safety Ordinance. Again, I disagree. Those regulations do have a positive impact.
So, Mr. Malaka, you're actually out of time, so I'm going to ask the following question so you can finish your presentation if there's no objection by the council. The question is, I think you stopped at, will the city's adoption of an industrial safety ordinance lead to unnecessary bureaucratic overregulation?
Actually, I think I covered that one already, but the unified program already addresses.
Okay, is the industrial safety ordinance unnecessary in light of the new state regulations involving PSM?
So the state regulations do involve PSM and do impose that on the refinery, but the city has no participation in that process. That is regulated and managed by the CUPA, which is the Environmental Health Department at the county level. The city should have access to the same information and should participate in the process to determine for itself whether it needs more stringent regulations to protect the city. And also I would say the other reason why regulations are not sufficient alone is because regulations can change through changes in political winds, political lobbying, and the like. And with an industrial safety ordinance, you have the obligations built into your local ordinances, so state law changes and regulatory changes will not affect that.
And doesn't the Bay Area Air Quality Management District plan to install new ambient air quality monitors, make the monitoring provisions of the Industrial Safety Ordinance unnecessary?
The answer again is no. The BACMID monitors are clearly insufficient to provide for the kind of monitoring that the proposed ordinance would require. The monitors, the plan that Valero just got approved, only puts monitors on the east side of the refinery, not on the west side where the homes are located and where people reside. Furthermore, it doesn't call for community-based monitors. It only calls for fence line monitors, which scientific evidence has shown has not been sufficient to accurately measure all the particulates that we're exposed to. So while those regulations are helpful, they don't cover the entire territory. This ordinance will allow for a more comprehensive monitoring network.
So thank you very much. I can't ask you any questions because it's a summary. So sorry you ran out of time. Unless there is no objection from the council, you could summarize. Is there any concern or objection?
No, I just wanted some questions, but he can summarize first.
Summarize first, please.
Yeah, as far as process safety management, I would agree with that. You need to have a mechanism, and this is authorizing legislation that gives you that mechanism. But the ISO goes far beyond that. It includes ambient air quality monitors. That is not in the state regulations, and the CUPA has no authority to impose that obligation. So this would be the community's own way of monitoring in real time whether they're being exposed to toxics on a regular basis and also in emergency situations, something I think is really very necessary.
Like I said, we may be somewhat on the same wavelength, because that was the next question. Last week, I guess the Air Board okayed, Valero's plan, which they had to do as a result of, the state's ISO requirement, and its fence line monitor. If we say, well, your choices are do an ISO or do the monitoring system the way we want, modify the plan that was okayed, you get your monitoring system. Because, I do agree, it seems like putting monitors embedded in the middle of the community is the one way you find out which way the wind actually blows. And also, I guess you could probably identify, where it's coming from, whether it's coming from Valero or it's coming from, Richmond, from Chevron or something like that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Sorry, he's really asking questions.